Hello, I'm Ellen Vince, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois, in the USA. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Leigh-on-Sea in the UK. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about. And I promise today you're going to get some interesting facts and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's October 22nd, 2025.
Not long to Halloween.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yippee. You know, I was thinking about there's going to be a lot of facts given in this episode about drought and the global crisis. And let me tell you, listeners, it's sobering. And many of you might be going to some get-togethers, Halloween get-togethers, or be with people this weekend. And I challenge our listeners to remember at least one of these facts to share with someone else, because it's going to rock your world when you hear this.
Yeah. It is quite sobering, isn't it? As we'll see. Now, it's not unusual for us in this podcast, of course, to find ourselves talking about the urgent risks posed by climate change. As we've seen time and again, the impacts can be very varied and often aren't receiving the attention they need. One area that's an obvious consequence and that actually does often hear the headlines is the increasing trend in drought, which is affecting many areas of the world. Today, we take stock of the extent of this crisis and the impacts it's having. As always, we'll come back later to see where our prayers and intentions may be needed in specific areas relating to this subject. You might also want to check out the Global Healing Response website, which listeners who've been with us for a little while, well over a year actually, may remember focused on water and its scarcity as a special theme early last year. We'll put a link for the web page to that resources page in the show notes, where you can find various resources supporting prayers and spiritual activities on this theme. And also we'll put a link to the special episode on water that we produced to accompany this at the time, which I can still remember very clearly, actually.
So, first of all, the hard truth that most of us do know, based on research and global climate data, drought conditions worldwide are intensifying at an unprecedented rate due to human-induced climate change. We heard this in our last episode when reflecting on the enormous list of challenges facing Syria, including coping with what is believed to be its worst ever drought. This is interesting. Atmospheric evaporative demand, that is, the potential amount of water that the atmosphere could take up from the land surface through evaporation and transpiration, has increased drought severity by an average of 40% globally. 40% compared to previous decades. We'll talk about atmospheric evaporative demand regularly as we go forward. And so we'll use its acronym, AED. This striking finding reveals how climate change is fundamentally altering drought patterns across all inhabited continents, threatening food security, economic stability, and even human survival.
Yeah. It's striking, isn't that? 40%, just looking at, in terms of modern history, the recent decades, we're not...
Recent decades.
Decades. We're not looking at centuries on the longer term cycles that are known to go on. Now, climate changes bring about drought in several ways. These include increasing continental surface temperatures, which have risen steadily since 1965, reaching an average of 1.8 Celsius above pre-industrial levels by 2023. Apologies, I don't know the Fahrenheit rise there, but it is significant. This warming trend directly correlates with rising evaporation rates observed between 1980 and 2020. Higher temperatures cause increased evapotranspiration, the loss of water from soil through evaporation and from plants through transpiration, which create AED, this vital process. The relationship between temperature and drought severity has been particularly seen in some recent extreme events. For example, high temperatures accounted for 61% of the 2020-2022 Western United States drought severity, whereas reduced precipitation only accounted for 39%. That's really quite interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that the shifting of the Gulf Stream was having quite an effect there, but it seems that this is the most important factor, the rising temperatures. And this represents a fundamental shift in the drivers of drought, with temperature now playing a dominant role over precipitation, where drought is being seen in many regions. Climate change is not only increasing temperatures, but also altering global precipitation patterns in ways that exacerbate the risk. While global average precipitation may increase slightly with warming, regional changes are highly uneven. So areas such as Latin America, the Mediterranean, Southern Africa, the Middle East, parts of Australia and China are projected to experience notable decreases in average annual rainfall. And on top of this, the frequency of extreme precipitation events is also changing dramatically. I think we see that quite often through some of the news. In 2024, months with record low precipitation were 38% more common than between 1995 and 2005. Parts of South America, Mediterranean, and Southern Africa are expected to possibly experience up to a four-fold increase in extreme low rainfall episodes by the end of this century.
Hence, drought conditions are expanding globally at an alarming rate. During the 5 years between 2018 and 2022, areas affected by drought expanded by 74% on average compared with 1981 to 2017. 74%, with increased AED contributing to 58% of this increase. The year 2022 was particularly severe, with 30% of global land area affected by moderate and extreme droughts, 42% of which was attributed to increased atmospheric evaporative demand. As may not surprise us from what does seem to be a more common occurrence in the news, the frequency and intensity of drought events have increased on all continents since the beginning of this century. As we just said, approximately 40% of global land has experienced increases in both the average number of droughts and their average intensity between 2000 and 2020 compared with the previous 50 years. Extreme drought events, defined as years when drought severity indices fall below -2, have also become more frequent and severe in many regions over this period. Indeed, 2023 to 2024 saw unprecedented drought conditions in many parts of the world, breaking previous records. This saw a total of 52 individual prolonged meteorological drought events being detected, with the major and longest lasting ones occurring in South America, Central and Eastern Asia, Central Africa, and North America. And in 2023, nearly half of all land on Earth experienced at least 1 month of extreme drought. I'm going to say that again. In 2023, nearly half of all land on Earth experienced at least 1 month of extreme drought, representing the second largest extent observed since 1951. The European Commission's Joint Research Center identified this as one of the most severe drought periods on record, with July 2024 reaching unprecedented global temperatures of over 17 degrees Celsius, which is 62 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's staggering, isn't it? Absolutely
Yeah.
staggering. And
Yeah.
obviously, we know population is massively growing, expanding. It seems to be exponentially in many of the regions which are worst affected. So many African countries, for example. Food scarcity, water scarcity. It's little wonder that this is leading to conflict and is leading to a desire to migrate. And it's clearly a global problem.
Yeah. I mean, there are going to be so many places that will be uninhabitable,
Yes, exactly.
according to these statistics. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Now, Africa is the continent that's been most severely affected. Over 90 million people across Eastern and Southern Africa face acute hunger due to persistent drought conditions. Southern Africa was particularly devastated last year, with roughly 1/6 of the population, that's 68 million people, needing food aid in August last year. Zimbabwe alone saw its 2024 corn crop reduced by 70% compared to the previous year, while 9,000 cattle died from thirst and starvation. Zambia and Malawi also saw repeated crop failures, threatening food security for millions. And further north, the Horn of Africa experienced its worst drought on record, with below average rainfall being seen over 6 consecutive years. Other regions of the world have witnessed unprecedented periods of crisis too. Brazil has seen its worst drought since monitoring began, with the scale of the 2023-2024 drought being estimated to be double that of the previous major drought back in 2015-2016. Major river systems, which include the Amazon, La Plata, and others, dropped to historically low levels, with the Rio Negro falling to its lowest level in more than a century. In North America, the western United States has been experiencing what researchers term temperature-dominated droughts, where human pollution-led warming has made a greater contribution on drought severity than precipitation deficits, as we were saying earlier. And as we noted in our recent episode on wildfires, out-of-control fires pose an increasing threat to both natural habitats and human communities. Severe drought conditions have been seen in Europe and Asia as well. In Europe, it's no longer just the traditionally affected areas in the south that witness regular extended periods of drought, but eastern and central parts of the continent too. I was in Cyprus just a few weeks ago visiting a friend who lives there, and he's saying, the reservoirs are running dry.
Oh.
As it happened when I was there was some rain, but that was very, very unusual and really did very little, sadly, to replenish those supplies. Other Mediterranean countries, including Spain, Morocco, and Turkey, have become what scientists describe as canaries in the coal mine, offering a preview of a grim future unless global warming is checked, and demonstrating that no country, regardless of its wealth or capacity, can afford to be complacent about the risk of drought.
So there are other impacts besides being thirsty. There's impacts on agriculture, people, and nature. Intensifying drought conditions, of course, pose threat to agriculture. Meta-analysis of over 1,800 simulations from agricultural studies reveals that a 10% decrease in precipitation can reduce crop volumes by 4 to 7%, with wheat showing even larger effects. However, drought-specific impacts are often more severe than precipitation effects alone suggest. In dryland areas of the United States, drought conditions have reduced corn and soy production by 2.2 to 2.6% compared to normal years. But under significantly worsened drought conditions, these losses may increase to over 6 to 10.2%. The nature of drought impact means that positive precipitation in one region cannot compensate for losses in drought-affected areas. For example, increased precipitation may boost soy crop volume by 6.1%, while decreased precipitation can reduce it by 15.3%. So, specialty crops, including fruits, vegetables, tree nuts, and medicinal herbs, are particularly vulnerable to drought due to their higher water requirements and higher value per unit of land. The obvious impacts of drought on human populations are similarly severe. Beyond direct agricultural losses, drought increases production costs as farmers must invest in more expensive irrigation methods and crop protection measures. And this economic strain leads to increased unemployment in agricultural sectors and rural communities, often triggering migration from rural to urban areas.
I imagine it must potentially put the small subsistence farmers essentially out of business as well.
Yeah.
Investing in new plant and major irrigation systems and so on, if it can be afforded, generally is going to be more within the reach of the larger concerns, unless it's done on a cooperative basis or there is some sort of central government or local, regional funding for that. Yeah. Drought increases food insecurity, of course, in rural communities, affecting nutrition and the health of populations who are dependent on agriculture for their livelihoods. Water scarcity also increases costs to access water for drinking, irrigation, and livestock watering. Yet drought's impacts on the environment extend far beyond water scarcity. When coupled with high temperatures, drought conditions increase the distribution and incidence of pests and diseases, which also, of course, can affect crops, forage, and livestock. These conditions also increase the risk of wildfire, creating cascading effects on ecosystems and air quality. So, as we often see, one thing leads to another and it just spirals.
Right.
As such, drought can affect entire ecosystems, reduce biodiversity, and alter species composition. Forest ecosystems face particular challenges as drought conditions increase susceptibility to disease, pest outbreaks, and fire damage. And worryingly, compound drought heatwave events are becoming more frequent and intense, with projections showing that roughly 20% of the world's land area will likely observe approximately 2 such events per year under the continued rates of warming. I'm not quite sure when that's going to kick in, but it's soon.
Soon enough.
Soon enough, yeah.
Yep, we do have some future projections and risks. Climate models project alarming increases in drought risk over the coming decades. Under current emission trajectories, drought frequency and intensity are expected to increase up to 7-fold in many regions by 2050, compared to pre-industrial times under a +4°C warming scenario, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. By 2030, 4 years from now, multiple studies project severe water scarcity conditions. Scientists warned that day zero droughts, when local water demand exceeds regional water supply, could hit many regions before 2030. 3/4 of drought-prone regions around the world will be at risk for extreme water shortages by 2100, with 1/3 potentially experiencing these conditions before 2030. In Canada, the United States, and the Mediterranean Europe, the frequency of extreme agricultural droughts is projected to double or triple under the 2°C of warming. Flash drought frequency is projected to rise by around 20% in Europe, Indonesia, and China, and up to 25% in Latin and North America by 2100. And by 2050, current climate models project that between 4.8 billion and 5.7 billion people will be living in areas that are water scarce for at least 1 month each year. Global demand for fresh water is projected to exceed supply much sooner, reaching 40% by 2030. That's staggering.
Yeah.
And that's due to the combined influences of climate change, human activity, and population growth. Day zero drought conditions may threaten some 750 million people globally by the end of this century.
I heard recently that these models actually there's a lot of disagreement over what's likely. I think it's very hard to predict. Is it going to be closer to the plus four degrees Celsius, or is it more in the sort of 2 degrees Celsius area? But even if it's more in the 2 degrees Celsius area, which seemingly quite a lot of scientists do believe it may be, these statistics are scary, aren't they? Absolutely
Oh my
shocking.
word. 2030, we're talking about, you know, 4 or 5 years from now,
Yeah.
a lot of this kicking in.
And again, it sort of brings home to me, the problems that those of us in the rich world think we have. I have never lived throughout my entire life in the UK. There's always been piped water 24
Mhm.
hours a day, and sewerage system is pretty good. I mean, it's in some cities it's an old infrastructure needing replacement and so on, but the actual idea has always been water is a basic human right
Mhm.
kind of thing. That's what I've grown up with. And when we live in a country where it is piped daily, we just take it for granted. Travel to some parts of India, for example, I've been to in the past, and you suddenly find, no, we've got water piped in on tap, maybe a few hours a day if we're lucky. And in some places, particularly across Africa, seeing people walk or take a mule or whatever for absolute miles with big plastic containers
Mhm.
to fill up with water every day just to provide for their family. That's if they're able to. So again, it's quite something to. I have to say, I think we just take it for granted very often. We do not appreciate what it is like to be without water. Or yeah, just not.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a Pisces. I need water. I'm a swimmer. Water is very
Yeah.
important to my psyche. And I think it's no mistake that I live near the Great Lakes, near Lake Michigan, because we know that a lot of our fresh water in the world comes from the Great Lakes.
Mhm.
It's that statistic of how much water in the world is actually fresh water and how much is available compared to what's frozen and what's in the land and stuff. There's a very small amount of water available. And I'm close to it.
Mm, mm.
Also, I live on a well, and so our water comes from a well. And after reading this, I was like, I'm very glad we have a well and access to water. But even in the United States, like you were talking, it can be very different when I visit my children in Arizona
Yeah.
and then in California. Those places are very careful about their water usage, and it's scary.
Yes.
The statistics around California, New Mexico, those places, they have some of these statistics popping up. It's going to be a problem.
And even if you're in a wealthy country like
Yeah.
the US, it's just impractical, isn't it, to import the amount of water to enable the distribution of
Yeah.
water from those areas where there's high precipitation to those areas in need. It's a lot easier in the UK, I have to say. I mean, we being much smaller, and that I think actually does happen to some degree. When reservoirs run dry down south, they can be kind of replenished, but that is unusual. Most countries don't enjoy that kind of benefit. We were reflecting when we a little bit before we started recording about desalination and the
Hmm.
fact that we are here talking about freshwater supplies locally in the main and how that gets distributed. So those who might be thinking, oh, there's lots of water in the world, the oceans, and again, another effect of climate change, ice caps melting, that's giving us more water.
Yes.
Well, there's got to be quite an investment in getting these desalination plants for
Right.
those that have access to seawater, I guess.
We need that 13-year-old at their science fair who creates the easy way to produce desalinated water
Ah,
for us all.
ah.
Yeah.
And I understand that dowsing is pretty good for finding water,
Yes,
people say.
that's
Yeah.
right.
So get
That's
out your
right.
dowsing
In the
rods.
land.
Yeah. So what about mitigation and how we adapt? There are various actions that may help arrest the trend of the severities being felt by drought. Governments can obviously play a crucial role in mitigating the effects of drought by applying appropriate policies and committing investment for effective drought management. As we've mentioned already, water resource management is highlighted by experts to be a cornerstone in any drought strategy. This includes developing long-term water resource management plans that account for climate change impacts, population growth, and economic development needs. Funding for agricultural adaptation also needs expanding, for example, to provide additional reservoirs for farms and to build irrigation networks. Companies across various industry structures are implementing drought-resilient strategies. Many water-intensive industries are adopting advanced monitoring technologies, efficient processing systems, and alternative water sources to reduce dependence on traditional supplies. There's actually a lot of good things happening out there, which we should acknowledge. Some agricultural businesses are also embracing precision agriculture technologies, including soil moisture monitoring, conservation tillage, and drought-resistant crop varieties. And these approaches can reduce agricultural water consumption while maintaining productivity levels. However, on a global level, the pace of such adaptation and availability of funding to support what are typically very expensive projects is severely lacking.
Individual actions toward water conservation are obviously important. Simple changes we can all make, such as turning off water while brushing our teeth and installing low flow toilets and shower heads, can dramatically reduce household water consumption. Landscape management also offers a major opportunity for water conservation, and there are pleasingly some role models showing the way. For example, I love this. San Antonio used native plants, efficient irrigation systems, and soil management to minimize water requirements in a major urban renewal project, replacing over 2 million square feet of water-intensive grass while supporting population growth of 80%, with only 20% increase in water demand. Let's benchmark that model.
Yeah, that's quite something, isn't it, really?
Yep.
It's quite something. And an example of where an urban development has actually done some good.
Right. Right. I
Usually the other
think
way
this
around, isn't it? I guess the
this could be
graph.
your little story to tell at the party. San Antonio, 80% growth, only 20% increase in water demand because they did it right.
Well done, San Antonio.
Yes.
Yeah. So where might we hone in with our intention and prayer? So as always, this is the part of the podcast you might like to bookmark to come back to. And we're going to mention a number of possible themes you might want to hold in your prayers and for intention in fairly quick succession, but as always, you may want to pause going through. So we'll put a note of this point, this bookmark in the show notes. Take a moment to center, allow yourself to become present with the core of your being, really to sink down within the body, feeling a rootedness with the physical ground and feeling a connection deep within as we open ourselves to offering intention. We ask that those suffering from hunger, displacement, and danger as a result of drought are sustained in love and light and guided to where their highest good will be protected.
We will that all farming communities whose livelihoods depend on adequate rainfall and soil moisture, including smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa, indigenous communities whose traditional water sources are disappearing, and agricultural workers facing unemployment due to crop failures, have wisdom to know how best to conserve water and sustain their livelihoods.
We pray that governments, companies, and individuals will receive wisdom to know how best to care for the environment and remaining mindful of the impacts of their decisions and actions.
We ask that government officials, corporate executives, and community leaders will have wisdom when making decisions about water resources, climate policy, and drought preparedness to know where to focus their attention and resources.
We will that researchers, scientists, and engineers working on drought prediction, water conservation technologies, and climate adaptation strategies will have wisdom to know where to focus their attention, and that they will receive insights into improving effectiveness in water purification, efficient irrigation systems, and drought-resistant crop development.
We ask that the hearts of politicians, civil servants, and decision makers and influencers in influential organizations will be moved to work for justice and equity in response to the world's demand and access to water. We ask that this recognizes that those least responsible for greenhouse gas emissions and least able to pay often suffer the most severe impacts, including vulnerable populations in sub-Saharan Africa and small island nations.
We will that all communities facing drought challenges will receive hope and strength to enable them to find the creativity and unity in responding to water challenges, while preserving cultural traditions and local knowledge that contribute to drought resilience.
And we will that examples of successful community adaptation and conservation efforts become widely known, such that others may be able to learn from these examples.
So this week, as we reflect upon the increasing risk and consequences of drought facing many countries in the world, we suggest holding as our main intention: we will for a transformation of hearts and minds regarding humanity's relationship with creation, including reducing our attachment to materialism, choosing sustainable lifestyle choices, and appreciating water as a sacred resource that is essential for life. Please join us in holding this. I was just reflecting actually on a story that I recall involving a labyrinth, or not just one labyrinth, it was 7 labyrinths. There's a wonderful lady in the Twin Cities in Minnesota.
Lisa?
No, this is, what's her name? Oh dear. Put me on the spot. Oh dear, this is terrible. Anyway, she had this idea, but there'd been a drought in an area, I think it was in Minnesota, to lay out on the ground. It was like marking out with stones or, I don't know, some spikes in the ground, 7 labyrinths. And these were in a particular pattern. She's very, very tuned in with earth energies and astrology, and there was some important seeming cosmic significance to this. And the wisdom was that labyrinths can attract water.
Mm-hmm. We know that.
No sooner had the 7th labyrinth been laid out than there was, the clouds in the sky started appearing, and there was apparently more rainfall within the next several hours than there had been in the previous 6 months. It was, I don't know the exact statistics there, but an amazing, immediate appearance, as it were, of rain. So there we go. Maybe there's another role for labyrinths out in.
Yeah, maybe we need to go over to sub-Saharan Africa and build some labyrinths.
Exactly. That could be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what is her name?
Well, how about you put it in the show notes when you think about it?
Yes, I could do.
So while Clive thinks about what her name is, that about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's daily insight timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out, too, for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us and holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
thank you. Go well. Stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Bintz and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins, and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.